Well, this war has taught us one thing: it's not to predict anything. Um, and my sense is that yes, the mood in Ukraine, mood in the leaders of Ukraine has darkened and got more pessimistic over the past few days. But the task for the Russians and the Russian military, which is not as competent as President Putin would like, the task for the Russians hasn't been made much easier, despite this mood of pessimism.
There are between 20 and 25 million tons of grain stuck in Ukraine by Russia's blockade of the Black Sea ports and warnings of a looming global food crisis. Russia and Ukraine together account for nearly 1/3 of global wheat supplies, while Ukraine is also a major exporter of corn, barley, sunflower oil and rapeseed oil. Britain has backed in principle a proposal by Lithuania for a naval coalition of the willing to lift the Russian blockade. Well, Nicholas Williams is the former NATO head of operations for Afghanistan and Iraq, and we can talk to him now. Good morning to you, Nicholas.
Good morning. Good morning.
Really good to have you with us. I don't know if you were able to hear our previous guest, who's an advisor to President Zelensky, but he was saying that he felt that if there was some will on the West to tackle this, that some way of breaking the blockade, of arranging humanitarian convoys out of those Black Sea ports could be introduced. I mean, what do you make of this idea?
Well, it's an idea which has been floating around for some time, some weeks, but it's always been opposed for one simple reason. It would have to have Russian agreement, acquiescence. The ports from have been mined, Odessa port, and the Ukrainians themselves have mined it in order to prevent the Russians from getting too close in their naval weapons. And so President Putin yesterday actually indicated that he was willing to talk about this idea, but on condition that the West raises the sanctions, lifts the sanctions against him.
And clearly the West is not about to start lifting sanctions against Russia. But the longer this blockade goes on, the more serious the effect it's having, as we were hearing from our Ukrainian guest, not just on Ukraine's economy, but more importantly, on global food supplies.
Yeah, yes, of course. And the countries and regions that will be hit most are those who are already vulnerable to starvation, hunger, famine, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, particularly the Middle East, where there's also conflicts preventing food supplies getting through. And it will be an incredibly severe crisis, which Mr. Putin will obviously exploit by saying that the West is, by not lifting sanctions, is making this crisis potential famine worse.
So, I mean, is it right then for NATO simply to say, well, look, this is too risky, we can't do it?
Well, NATO has not said it's too risky. It would require NATO to consider the idea, which it hasn't actually done, because NATO is an organization of 30 countries. And some of those countries would not want NATO to be planning or to be assessing that potential for breaking the blockade, while NATO takes a view that it doesn't want to escalate the problem with Russia. It doesn't want to confront Russia. And unfortunately, Russia, Mr. Putin, has deterred NATO more than NATO has deterred Mr. Putin.
I'm going to bring in my co-host, Katy Balls, now.
Just picking up on your comments on NATO, you allude to the fact, obviously, it's a large organisation made up lots of different members who have various opinions when it comes to what the end goals of the war in Ukraine should be, whether compromise should be found. Does that mean actually it's very tricky to reach unity when it comes to something very complicated like this, which comes with obviously significant risks?
Yes, you're perfectly right. NATO's Article 5, just the defense of the members, only applies to the members. Ukraine has been a close partner of NATO, benefiting from training and so on for a number of years. But so long as it's not a member, NATO can only bolster that training, bolster that political support, but not do anything to intervene because, as you say, a number of countries, among them Turkey, for example, are very hesitant about dragging NATO into a confrontation in the Black Sea.
Can I just ask you about the wider picture? It does look as though Russia is gaining ground in this invasion. It's now succeeded in taking over what's left of Mariupol, and we're hearing about those slow, gradual, but gains being made right across the east of Ukraine. Are you concerned that Russia is winning on its new strategy?
Well, this war has taught us one thing: it's not to predict anything. My sense is that yes, the mood in Ukraine, the leaders of Ukraine, has darkened and got more pessimistic over the past few days. But the task for the Russians and the Russian military, which is not as competent as President Putin would like, the task for the Russians hasn't been made much easier, despite this mood of pessimism. And so long as the Ukrainians can hold out, then weapon supplies, training of personnel will kick in sometime in the late summer. Okay. And then there'll be another swing in the momentum of this and rhythm of this war. So it's unpredictable. And the task for the Russians, for Putin, is to exploit his current momentum, which is not great, but it's greater than before, current momentum to the full.
Nicholas Williams, former NATO head of operations for Afghanistan and Iraq. Good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed.